Hi, welcome to the Personality Hacker Podcast. My name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
Today we're talking about awareness, and one of the reasons why this came to my mind is I remember listening to a radio interview back in the late 90s, I think. Terry Gross of Fresh Air was interviewing a guy by the name of John Stilgoe, and he was talking about, he was a professor at Harvard. He wrote a book called Outside Lies Magic, and talking about regaining awareness and history in everyday places. And it's really cool. I'm kind of rereading the book right now, and as I'm reading through, I'm understanding that he is really focused on the visual human landscape, right? So basically like buildings that have been built over the years and then modified, or road systems or rail beds or power lines, how humans have affected the environment and how we have kind of put our mark on the world in a sense. And going out, the book is talking about going out and observing natural history and human history and how they've merged, and then using that to increase the awareness of what you think about the world, basically pattern recognition, things like this. So it's a really fascinating book, and I thought we could talk about it today.
I haven't read the book. You read the first chapter to me, or was it the prologue yesterday? Mm-hmm. And what I thought was interesting is that it's specifically like what he's talking about, or it seemed to me what he was talking about was specifically awareness around things that we completely take for granted.
Yeah.
Like, you've walked by this mailbox 1,000 times, and when you increase your awareness of what's going on around you, you might stop and notice that the paint is chipped, and it's not, the paint underneath it is not the normal blue color. It might be a different color. So the question is, did the post office go from one standardized branding color of blue? Did it have something before that? So his form of awareness was to start questioning the etymology of things. Like, where did this thing come from? Why is it different than what it is now? And what led it from its original state to the state that it has now?
Yeah.
It's really interesting to me because I think because of my personality type, my brain kind of naturally works that way. And at the same time, I also recognize that there are so many things that I personally take for granted that I never question the etymology of. But I think what he was trying to indicate is that when you increase your awareness of how things have changed over time, it's not just the object, it's really a story of human evolution. It's really a story of how people and society has evolved over time to accommodate whatever's relevant for that time period.
Yeah.
He was talking about, in the chapter you read me, how ornate things used to be and how things are so much less ornate now. They're like, we do not create as much ornament around our architecture as we once did, at least in this country. And so you've actually had that question many times. Why are things so much more Cracker Jack box styled now than they used to be? They used to take so much more time and effort into like crown moldings and chair railings and how things looked on the outside, and lead windows with all these beautiful stained glass windows, things that are so beautiful in the past, and now we just we just make houses, house after house after house, which kind of looks like each other, maybe with slight variations. So why did we go from a much more ornamental style to something a lot more, you might argue practical, but a lot less pleasing?
Utilitarian. Think about just the difference between the movie theaters that we see from like the 1930s and 40s, how ornate, how big they were, chandeliers and giant balconies, to the Cineplex today, which is pretty stripped down. It's just a big blank room with black walls and some speakers and a screen, and that's about it.
And some stadium seating.
Yeah, and that's about it. Like, there's like no ornation to movie theaters anymore. It's not an experience anymore. And I think what he was talking about, like, as an example in the book, he talks about in the previous part of last century, green paint was believed to calm the nerves. And so in a lot of houses in the kitchens, it was advised that you paint your kitchen green so that your wife can have her nerves calmed and she doesn't have dreams of going out and getting a job or, rousing too much...
or being part of the suffrage movement.
Too much of the suffrage movement, things like this. And if you notice in police stations and insane asylums, the walls are also painted the same kind of like...
apple green.
Icky, apple green. And what he was saying is, okay, so increase your awareness. Go into a house sometime, like somebody's house, and if it's an older house... open up a cabinet, peek behind the sink, underneath the sink, and see if there's some green on the walls to see if that's something that was painted in that house. Just little things like this to kind of see the evolution of that kitchen or that house potentially. And then notice, that this is the same color green that's in police stations or in insane asylums still today that's used. And just these little tweaks, these little observations of, like you said, understanding human evolution through the eyes of your awareness and pattern recognition.
Well, his sort of explanation for why things used to be so much more ornamental in the past but are less so now is that people didn't have as much technology to distract them. And so there was people weren't reading TVs. And if you go back far enough, most people weren't reading novels, because books were not as easy to get your hands on. So people weren't distracting themselves with entertainment, and they were more visual creatures. Like they entertained themselves with their, the room, right? Like the room was beautiful because that's what they were spending all their time looking at was the room. And so things were more beautiful because there was more of a demand for beauty at the time. And now because people are more easily, we have entertainment in so many different forms. If our rooms are not perfectly ornamented, that's fine because I'll just watch a movie and I won't really be paying attention to the crown molding anyway.
Yeah, turn off the lights and just watch that movie.
And I think that was kind of the same mentality that gave birth to what you're talking about, which is like paint the walls a certain color in order to calm that woman down so that she won't be a part of the suffrage movement. She didn't have as much entertainment and she was going to be in the kitchen a lot. So the culture of the time, there's so much there. Like, what you can take away from the statement, paint your kitchen apple green so that your woman will be soothed and not want to be a part of the suffrage movement or go out and get a job. There is so much story in that statement. And so increased awareness helps us understand where we came from, where we're at right now, and where, you get some pattern recognition going, and you can start thinking about where we're going to end up or where we're going next. And so I think increased awareness is so interesting because it gives us so much more information to work with. And that's just awareness of, like, say, our, the ambiance of the room or the ambiance of the road or street we're walking down. But there's other kinds of awareness too.
Yeah.
There's awareness of being present, like fully in the moment and understanding what's going on around you. There's the awareness of understanding the systems that are surrounding you. And by systems, I mean like the ecology of what's happening in the environment around you. As in, there are all sorts of little systems happening all over. The ants that come into your house to look for food, the little ant scouts that are looking for food represent an entire system behind it. They're part of the ecology. They're part of, who's feeding what and which animal and which bug is feeding which bug.
Yeah.
And so there's an awareness that when you see that ant and you go and you just stomp on it, there's a level of, sort of disregard or cavalier nature we have for all these little things that are going on around us that are nuisances or obnoxious. And there's a level of awareness we get when we start to recognize that little nuisance for me in the moment might be part of something really big and really fleshed out. And then kind of taking an appreciation of that system. Gregory Bateson, who is one of the most influential people of the last century in systems thinking, basically, I'm going to paraphrase what he said because I don't remember the exact quote, but we're not aware of systems. We don't understand their delicate nature, and so we destroy them because we don't understand how it works. And then, of course, right now we're dealing with this whole bee crisis, right? Like the bees die, we die. And what's killing the bees? Well, the bees are all part of a major system. And it's a lack of awareness that we've had as people that have created a situation where the bees are dying.
Yeah.
And it's because we just didn't understand how the system worked. Or maybe we understood how the system works, but we didn't care. Or like a small group of people didn't care, and a large group of people were simply unaware of the problem. So awareness is not just in, being aware of your context in the moment. And it's not just being aware of stuff that you might have taken for granted, like, the etymology of something, but it's also being aware of the systems around us and how those things are working and what our relationship to those components are, that help us, get to a much better place for everybody.
Yeah. There's so much that is running through my head now because I just want to unpack a bunch of stuff you just said. But the one thing that you said that I really wanted to kind of talk about is this idea that you said that being presence is part of being aware. And I think it's presence of mind, it's being physically present. And I go back to this whole thing. Like the other day I was, my son Gunnar, I was just like on my phone texting or something real briefly. And he's like, grown-ups are always on their phones texting or like having their heads down on their phones. And actually I try really hard when I'm with my children or with you or with somebody in a personal relationship. I'm physically in the presence of somebody. I kind of have a personal rule that I don't check my email or answer my phone unless I'm expecting a call or it's something that, I like formally say, excuse me, and I take it and I go in the other room, or I try to like engage with that, because if I'm present with somebody, I want to be present with them. I want to stay with them as much as possible. And it's tough in modern culture because we're constantly getting inundated with Twitter messages and emails and phone calls and text messages and all this stuff that I'm living my life in my phone rather than with the person I'm across the table from. And I think that it's going to be an uphill battle to develop a sense of awareness and presence because we're so distracted and we're doing the BlackBerry prayer all the time. We're like looking down at our you go to like a subway or public bus system and everybody's looking down at their BlackBerry or their iPhone or their Android now, and they're not like looking up at the world. They're looking down at a screen constantly. And I think that's not just from the physical sensory inputs, but they're also now no longer engaging socially with other people. They think they are. It's synthetic engagement through text, but it's not face-to-face interaction anymore. And I think we're losing some awareness through all of this. We're gaining awareness with technology, but we're also losing awareness with technology. It's kind of a double-edged sword. And as humans, we kind of need to be in control of this, I think. So I see this as a challenge for us coming up with with the new generation that's going to only have smartphones. They'll never know anything different, and they're going to have those inundated messages constantly. So that was one thing that you mentioned. And then this idea that systems are all around us and we can observe them if we just stop and look. The other day we actually do have ants in our house, and you were like, uh-oh, that's a scout ant looking for food. And we're kind of like, what do we do? So I think you took it and like removed it from the house and put it back outside so he would have a hard time, bringing all his friends into the piece of food that what he was looking for, I guess. But there's these systems that are happening all over the place, and we need awareness now more than ever because we are living in a more complicated, complex world where we don't need less awareness, we need more awareness because of that.
Yeah. One of my favorite people named Wyatt Wood Small has a quote where he says, "Nature is unkind to creatures who lack awareness." And you see that in the wild in the sense of like, there are certain animals that are basically food for everybody else. And they have compensated for the fact that they're not particularly aware by just producing a bajillion kids, offspring. And at the same time, you also notice that they do have their own sense of awareness too. I think of rabbits. Like rabbits are food for everybody. Everybody eats rabbits. And that's why there's a gajillion of them that are born all the time. And yet it's really hard to sneak up on a rabbit. So even the animals that are basically food have a sense of awareness, because if they don't, that particular rabbit is done for. So it's interesting to see how nature, in maybe sort of these lower levels of consciousness creatures, that they are extremely aware because it's illustrated to them all the time that awareness is a life or death issue. For humans, especially in developed countries, we're far enough removed from imminent death all the time that I think we kind of chill out a little bit on the whole awareness thing. I think we're it's easier for us to sort of not have to be thinking in life and death terms all the time.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think that we're soft, basically, as humans. We don't have to think about survival, and survival does help us increase awareness, because if you're looking over your shoulder for a predator, or if you're having to protect the camp at night, you are going to be listening and observing what's happening around you so you can survive. And I think, like, if I go into a big city, my awareness increases of my physical safety and survival. I'm usually a little bit more aware of my surroundings, especially if it's an unfamiliar city. There's lots of people that I don't know, and I'm kind of, not that I'm suspicious of everyone, I'm just more vigilant. I'm just keeping my eye open for any anomalous situation that could be potentially threatening for me. And that's just how I've decided to live my life. Maybe I'm a little bit more, not scared, but maybe I'm more
safety oriented
than the average person. Yeah, I don't know. But I do increase my awareness of that kind of thing.
I think we are at a place, at least in developed countries, where we don't have to have the sharpened awareness of the moment that some predator is going to attack us. I think the next evolution, though, or the next step in awareness is not sharpening your sense of awareness in the moment, as it is increasing the territory of your awareness. Like taking in more territory that you are aware of. In fact, this is kind of tied to our podcast on the Graves model, talking about as you develop and go up levels in the Graves model, your awareness, your sense of consciousness takes in more territory. It starts out very small with just yourself, and then it encompasses you and your family, and then it encompasses you and your family, maybe families outside of that, and then it encompasses an institution, and then it sees the institution from the outside, and then it encompasses the globe, right? So like as you develop in levels of your own maturity, your own personal evolution, your awareness territory expands. And so I think both styles of awareness are very important.
Yeah.
But I think because we are in a place where we're not constantly fearing predators, the second style of awareness we're now qualified for. Whereas before we weren't qualified to take in larger amounts of territory because of the imminent threat required us to use our awareness to sharpen the moment, to be fully present in the moment. And I think both styles are very complementary for each other. Increasing your sense of awareness in the moment by having heightened senses, really understanding what's going on around you, really seeing the texture of the environment around you. And then also at the same time, increasing your awareness or increasing the territory of your awareness to start seeing those systems. Like the ant is not just an ant that makes me go, ooh, gross, and I want to stomp on it. The ant is part of an ecosystem that I might not be able to see right now, but that ant is a representation of an ecosystem, regardless of whether or not I'm able to personally witness it. And so I take in more territory by saying there's an entire ecosystem going on with those ants. And just recognizing that ecosystem exists means that I'm going to take in more of the ecosystem, that there's other bugs around me. Like those ants are feeding, say, spiders, and the spiders are feeding birds and, or bats or whatever. And so you just kind of start to take in more and more. And then you understand how there's all these complex systems going on around you. And you're less likely to destroy them. Right? So I think there's power in both styles of awareness. The sharpened sense of the moment and also the expansion of territory in your frame, in your awareness frame.
Yeah. I think, and I agree with you, that kind of seeing the systems and the meta narratives that are happening around you gives you a place, if you can focus on that as well as sensory, it gives you a place to hang your sensory experiences on, I think is what you're saying. Mm-hmm. It's like, I have a context, because if you're just out in your neighborhood walking around and you see random pieces of information and you don't have a broader sense of you don't have a grammar or a literacy of where to hang that sensory detail on. So you don't understand the history of your country or your culture or something like that. Different things may not make sense. There might be two different types of architectured houses, for example, in your neighborhood. And if you understand the history of your neighborhood or the history of the area that you're living in right now, you'll understand these two different styles of architecture might fit in two different time periods in the history, and it might represent a people movement or a sway in public opinion or how things changed over time. And if you know that kind of meta-narrative or that context for how the system evolved, those sensory pieces of information that you're picking up are going to be more meaningful, and you're going to be able to use them in a better way.
Yeah, like what if the two styles of architecture in your neighborhood are actually representing two different styles of how people come at the world, and maybe that's informing a community battle, or maybe even a struggle the community is having that they're not aware of the etymology of it. It could be representing something that's really pertinent to your current experience, but it's really tough to track back where it came from, and what if these two different styles of architecture are a hint as to what's going on there.
Exactly.
I think I keep the most practical piece of this that keeps coming up for me is our personal health. One of the major epidemics that the United States is currently facing, and I think a lot of the developed countries are kind of facing this, Australia I think is facing this as well, is the obesity epidemic. And the big question is why is everybody getting fat, right? Like you and I were watching a Grateful Dead video from the 60s or 70s? Was it late 60s?
I think it was early 70s.
Early 70s. And remember how they were all walking by and every single person was thin? We were looking at each other going, well, I guess the obesity epidemic hadn't hit yet. Because every single person who walked by in that video, and of course they were all hippies and stuff, but I'm assuming that they weren't people who were like super taking care of their bodies, and every single person was thin. And you just don't see that anymore in the United States in anything that's recorded, right? And this whole idea of awareness and being aware of both what's happening for you in the moment and then also being aware of the ecosystems around you. One of the things that makes it very difficult to manage the obesity epidemic is that we don't experience the consequences for our actions when it comes to food in the immediate. Like sometimes we do. If we're allergic to something, we'll experience that real quick.
Yeah.
If we're intolerant of a particular food, we'll experience it probably in the next day. But as far as like gaining weight, we don't experience that in the moment because weight gain happens over time, just like weight loss happens over time. So having that one, like the asynchronous relationship with food, that what I take into my body right now might not show up for a little while.
Maybe 40 years.
Right, exactly. Yeah, totally. Because there's sort of that asynchronous relationship, then it's really easy to be unaware of what is happening to our bodies, right? And why what's happening to our bodies is happening. It's very easy to go like, well, I don't know why I keep gaining weight. Or, yeah, I probably shouldn't have eaten that, but I probably shouldn't have eaten that isn't like a conviction, like, don't touch that food because I'm in a situation right now where I'm gaining a lot of weight and that food is going to be part of the problem. So being really in the moment of, like, this food has marrying the two styles of awareness, the ecosystem awareness, which is sometimes things have a delayed response. I might be 1 degree of separation time-wise from the result. So taking in that first, and then using that awareness to inform my sensory awareness in the moment of I'm eating this food and I'm just scarfing it down and I'm not thinking about it. But I'm going to take a moment to be present. I'm going to take a moment to be massively aware of what's happening right here, right now. And I'm going to think about this food as I eat it, right? I'm going to think about whether or not I'm going to have one of these burgers or 2 of them. I'm going to think about whether or not I'm going to have 1 bowl of ice cream or 2 bowls of ice cream. Or I'm going to be thinking about whether or not I truly need all of that or if it was just a flavor I was trying to get. Like, I might just need 1 spoonful and I'm totally sated if I completely invest in that spoonful.
Sure.
If I'm totally present to the sensory experience of that 1 spoonful of ice cream, that might be all I needed. But if I'm not present, then I'm just going to keep scarfing it down. And then I'm marrying that being fully present to the sensory experience in the moment with, again, another zoom out, taking in more territory going, and if I eat 2 bowls of ice cream, this is going to be the end result. right? Or if I eat those 2 hamburgers as opposed to maybe having a sandwich or whatever, this is going to be the end result. Now, in the moment, I can make more informed choices. I can make choices that will directly impact my health and the extension of my life, potentially. Yeah. So this awareness thing isn't like, oh, it's a great exercise and you should try it because it's fun. It's actually, it can be deadly serious. Like, awareness can be something that directly impacts your health, the longevity of your life. Awareness is, even though we're not like fleeing predators anymore, we have, more sophisticated problems, but awareness is still the tool. It's still the tool to solve most of those problems.
Absolutely. And I think the whole zoom in and zoom out idea you have of, this, you're present in the moment. And, our guest Chelsea O'Brien, when we had a conversation about food and
binge eating
on a previous podcast, she talked about really immersing yourself in a sensory experience of eating, because then you're aware of what's happening and you're like thoroughly enjoying the flavors and the textures and all this, to not just mindlessly eat. And then with the zoom out, seeing the systemic and seeing the narrative of what's happening, I think that almost has to happen back and forth. Zoom in, sensory presence; zoom out, context. Mm-hmm. Zoom in, sensory presence. And if you can, and I don't think it's something that you just have or don't have. This is a skill you build on both levels. I mean, I work with both my sons right now. They're 8 and 6, and I'm doing a lot of awareness things. Like the other day, we were in a small town, and I said, I want you guys to look down at the street and notice something in this small town. What do you notice is missing? And they both were looking around. They're like, oh, we're not really sure. We got to the point where we realized there wasn't as much trash in this small town along the street corridors, along the gutters, as there are in big cities. And so we had a conversation around, there's more people in big cities. It's a little harder to manage. There's a lot more anonymity, or I can't say the word. Anonymity, thank you. In a big city, so people are less likely to be conscious about throwing food at, through wrappers and trash and things around.
Yeah, it's like that dude threw something out their window, not Bill threw something out his window.
So we had a conversation about this, and that was through the lens of kind of sensory awareness, and then taking the sensory detail of what we were looking at and applying it to a larger context of a small town versus a big city. And these little things, I think, help people develop this ability to zoom in and zoom out. It was a zoom in, zoom out moment with my 2 boys, where I was trying to lead them through this kind of exercise so they can begin to do this, on a regular basis.
Yeah. I think this is, like you said, it's a muscle you exercise. It's not something that, some forms of awareness we just come with, right? Yeah. Like it's been very important for us evolutionarily to be aware. So we have these skills, inside of us. And yet, like you said, we can grow soft through, lack of use. And our awareness can get really pretty low, actually. So as a listener, one of the greatest exercises you can do to gain higher awareness is to teach yourself to be fully present in the moment without judgment. Eckhart Tolle, in the book The Power of Now, talks about, and when you start to do this will be a challenge. It's not easy to do. But he recommends, when you do something, do it for its own sake without judgment. Just be fully present to the moment. If you're washing dishes, don't think I'm washing dishes in order to get the dishes done. Just be with the water. Just be with the soapy sponge. Just be with the glass. And there's really no goal that you're rushing toward, right? Like there's really no, I got to get this glass clean and put back into, on the shelf. You're just like, if that's all you ever do for the rest of your life, then that's all you're ever going to do for the rest of your life. And that's fine, without any judgment. That's one of the best ways to begin like sensory awareness training, is just to be fully present in the moment. And then see how long you can hold that. It's interesting that when you first begin this exercise, oftentimes we're so used to thinking specific thoughts that thoughts will just flood you immediately. It's hard to do it for 30 seconds. Yeah. However, just being with the situation, just being present and fully, aware of all of the sensory, being aware of it without judging it, without thinking any specific thought, but just being with it, is one of the best ways to get a pure version of that. and then take that skill that you're learning and then apply it to things that you do want to give thought to, which is, okay, I'm just going to be with this street. I'm just going to be with the sidewalk as I walk down it. Yeah. And then when the thought comes up of, oh, I wonder why that house is completely different than the house next to it, like, take a moment to indulge that.
Yeah.
Take a moment to think, why are those two things slightly different? And then build the skill of just noticing. Just build that skill of noticing and try to do it for about at least 5 to 10 minutes a day.
Yeah, I notice, and I think part of this is reclaiming a little bit of your childhood as you're talking about just being one with the dish soap and kind of just enjoying the sensory experience of washing dishes. I think of our daughter who's 2, Piper. She'll walk and she'll see like a mud puddle. She'll walk over, she'll step into the mud puddle, and then she'll just sit down in the mud puddle and just start smacking her hands against the water or the mud.
Right.
There's no story for her. Like, oh crap, now I'm all messy. I got to go home and get a bath. My pants are going to be wet. Like, she doesn't have any context for what she's doing. She's fully present in the moment, experiencing the mud puddle for what it is. This muddy, wet, icky thing. And she's just enjoying feeling the water, feeling the mud, feeling the stuff between her fingers. And she could spend a long period of time doing that without like having any story or any narrative around it. And as she gets older, she's going to start building more stories and narrative. And you notice that, you know, people in their 50s don't just walk over to, well, people in their 20s don't just walk over to a mud puddle and plop down into a mud puddle anymore, because they've got a whole story around what that means. And so you lose, as you grow up, you lose some of that direct contact with your sensory experience like you do as a child, particularly a baby, a toddler. You begin to like be socialized out of some of this. Mm-hmm. And I think that you have this already in you from the time when you're very little to begin to reclaim again some of those sensory experiences. I don't think that doing the dishes is much different than that mud puddle ultimately. Mm-hmm. Just reclaiming some of that. I'm just have my hands in warm soapy water and I'm running a sponge over this dish. It's like this feeling of just being with what's happening and not having this story around it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But at the same time then, like we keep talking about, zooming out and understanding the context of everything and how that soap that I'm draining down this sink might not be good for the environment. Yeah. So it's this yin-yang pull. It's like understanding that the soap goes into a bigger system of the septic system it goes into, and it's going to go leach into whatever. Need to be responsible with that, but at the same time being present with what's happening in the moment as well. So it's like it's a skill set that I don't think comes naturally, and we have to really think about building.
Yeah, well, and the purpose of the exercise in Power of Now is not for what we're talking about necessarily. That's more to get to a point of non-judgment and to not be attached or married to your thoughts. So he recommends the exercise for something slightly different than we're talking about. And at the same time, I think it's still a really powerful exercise. Mm-hmm. I think it still works in this context really well. And I think on top of that, so that's the first half of the exercise of being present and like just kind of taking in sensory, like building your sensory acuity just by being present without judgment. And then going over to the other side, which is the more zoomed out, when you observe something that your autoresponder tells you is simply a nuisance, I think actually nuisance might be one of the best triggers for this. Because when we think of something as a nuisance, we almost believe that thing was set there just to annoy us. Right? Like anytime something is a nuisance, our brain says that thing is the enemy because it was sent there just to interrupt my day. Yeah. Or just to give me hassle or whatever it is. Which of course is thoroughly ridiculous. Right? Like as if the entire universe is not only orchestrated for us, but also to, cause us delay or to annoy us or bug us.
There's a stoplight in the town we live in right now that is like 5 minutes. I swear to goodness, it's 5 minutes long. And I'm sitting there with my blinker on waiting to turn left at the stoplight over and over again. And I'm like, why is this stoplight so long? It's like, this is here just to annoy me. I know it is. Right. And it's like, no, there's a reason. Hopefully it's not just negligence or some idiot put it up. There's a reason why there's a timer on it and it lasts as long as it does. Probably there's a traffic pattern that I don't understand. I can't see the full picture of. But someone that's a traffic engineer understands that this has to be this long of a traffic light in order to let this traffic flow this direction so that it doesn't cause a traffic jam later down the road or whatever it is. It's a big system that they're taking into account. And in the moment, I'm annoyed by this light taking forever to turn green so I can turn left. But ultimately, there's something bigger going on than just my experience. And kind of this idea, when you have, like what you're talking about, a nuisance, instead of just getting annoyed in the moment, say, why is this here? What is the system that this is a part of?
Right.
That's causing me a nuisance in the moment, but it might be a bigger picture that I'm not seeing.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a great exercise too, I think, for people to increase your awareness around, and it also increases the grace you give other people and systems and the things we interact with in the world. And you can calm down, not have high stress, and die of a heart attack at the age of 40.
Yeah, totally. So really there's 2 exercises for this week. I think both of them are equally powerful. And I think some of us are maybe more naturally good at one over the other. Maybe some people have a natural, ability with being present in the moment, but they might miss out on systems. And some people might be better at understanding systems, right? And might be not very good at having high sensitivity to an awareness to the moment. So whichever one is like you're less naturally strong at, do that one. So there's 2 exercises, and gravitate towards the one that's, not as natural for you. When you were talking, I was thinking, as we do these podcasts, as we do more and more videos, we get more and more feedback. And one thing that's a little unnerving to me is, and I think this is not uncommon, is to put yourself out there and recognize that somebody's going to give you negative feedback, right? Like, you're going to get negative feedback in some way, because there's never going to be 100% everybody's going, whatever you're doing is the most amazing thing ever. So when you put yourself out there, it's really difficult to deal with negative feedback if you haven't prepared yourself. And my brother is a science fiction writer. He has written some very successful science fiction books. And in fact, one of his, actually his entire series is being optioned right now for a television show. So he's getting pretty big right now. Like, his sci-fi books are getting really big. He's getting a lot of attention. And there's lots of comments on the internet about him as a writer and the books. And not that long ago, I visited him. He lives in New Mexico. And I said, do you ever read the comments? And he's like, oh, I hate reading comments. I'm like, oh, is that because... some people are going to give you negative reviews and that's a problem? He goes, actually, that doesn't really bother me. And I'm like, really? How is it that doesn't bother you? Because I was like looking for a tip for it to not bother me when I put myself out there and people give me negative feedback. And he said something that I thought was actually pretty astute. He goes, you don't know where that person was at when they wrote that comment. He goes, you don't know what was going on for them. You don't know what was happening in their mind.
Yeah.
And he goes, they could be having a terrible day. They could be having a terrible life. He's like, it could have absolutely, and probably does have absolutely nothing to do with you. He's like, so I love, positive comments because, I just like them. He goes, but the negative comments, he's like, you don't know what was happening for that person. Which was so fantastic, because I thought of it like the ant, that scout ant that came into the kitchen, which was a nuisance or an annoyance for me. But if I had just stomped it or felt bad about it, or like went, oh God, we're going to have ants, then I would have completely neglected the fact that there is an entire ecosystem going on behind this ant that I'm not seeing. And that's basically that comment, that negative comment or whatever, is like that ant for Ty. He's like, yeah, well, you don't know what's happening there. There's like an entire ecosystem happening in the background that you couldn't possibly predict. So why would you only see the one piece of evidence, or the one thing that's coming out, the one emergent, as being about you? He's like, it's not about you. It's about that person and whatever's happening in their life. I thought that was a fantastic illustration of using a nuisance to respond by recognizing that there's something much bigger happening. And you might not be able to ever know what that ecosystem is, but just recognizing that it's there actually is, again, a practical application for people's individual lives. You take a nuisance, which could create stress in you. Stress, of course, is the killer, the great killer of, humans. And you just sort of redirect that energy towards a more open frame, which is, I don't actually know what's going on for that person, so why would I take it as a nuisance for me?
Why do I assume automatically ill intent or bad motive? Why can't I just as easily assume good intent, good motive, and it just happened to come out this way, and they aren't even aware of how this is impacting me potentially as another person? Or I think of like road rage.
Yeah.
Like on the highway, I get so annoyed by some people cutting me off, and I'm like, why is this person an idiot? And then I'm like, well, maybe they're not an idiot. Maybe they didn't see me, or maybe they didn't have awareness of their driving and how they're coming across to other people. I don't know what their life's like right now in that car over there. Yeah. I have no clue. And it's an exercise to try to expand that.
Yeah.
And I would say I'll just give another exercise for the alternative of being present in the moment. My parents play this game. They've done it since I was a little kid. we'll be in a restaurant somewhere as a kid, and my dad will go, okay, Debbie, close your eyes. My mom's named Debbie. All right, I want you to tell me what's the color of the carpet. And my mom will try to remember what color, and he'll do this randomly with her. And he did this all my life, just different places, restaurants, places we were at, and ask different features of the room to see how well she absorbed coming in. And usually she was pretty good. She'd get color of carpet, she'd get how many people were sitting at a table across from us. And she had like a sense of awareness about her environment. And they would do this all the time as a game. So I think after a while, she started preemptively paying attention to what was going on because she knew he was going to ask this. That's a game you could play with your kids or your spouse or your friends, whatever, to increase practical in the moment awareness if that's something that's a challenge for you.
Yeah.
As a really interesting game. Next time you're out to lunch or something, just close your eyes and try to remember the different details of the room and have somebody help you associate those and remember those.
Yeah. That's we've given a lot of exercises.
We have.
There's a lot of
so the big 2 ones are in the moment, be present and pay attention. Maybe do a game of sorts, and then I think the other one is using nuisances to trigger a bigger picture. Mm-hmm. Things that annoy you to say, okay, what's actually happening behind the curtain? So those kind of 2 yin yang exercises I think are really powerful for awareness. And certain, like we talk about all the time, certain personality types are going to lend themselves to one or the other as probably they're more skilled in it already, and the other one's going to be more of a challenge. My guess is a lot of our listeners are pretty good at kind of seeing behind the curtain and seeing systemic, big picture things. Mm-hmm. But they might forget that they have mismatching socks when they walk out of the door in the morning. Not all of our listeners, but some may have that going, that Einstein's effect going on, where they're so up in the clouds they forget to be present in the moment.
Yeah, exactly. I think probably our brand of listener most likely gravitates towards not, having a challenge or a struggle with being present in the moment. Yeah. But they probably are pretty good at seeing a bigger ecosystem.
Absolutely.
But regardless of whichever one is, your personal, hang up versus a natural aptitude for you, try to exercise the other one. Do what you can.
Zoom in, zoom out.
And if you've got any other exercises that you can think of, please let us know. Leave a comment on the Personality Hacker website. Let us know what you've done to train your awareness, or maybe experiences or things that you can see in your life that would have been greatly impacted or would be greatly impacted with gaining higher awareness.
Yeah. And I'd like to formally invite you to come over to personalityhacker.com and really begin your personal development journey based on your individual personality. We have an assessment, a test. You can take the test for free and get a summary of your results of what personality you are, your preferences are, basically. And then you can go down the rabbit's hole and get, purchase a full assessment, and there's all sorts of products and services we offer at the site. But I'd invite you to come and be part of this Personality Hacker movement. And we've got our Facebook page, facebook.com/personalityhacker, twitter.com/personalityhack, HACK, and join in the discussion. We're really excited about connecting with you personally, and we're very active on these social media platforms. So come over and join in the discussion with us. My name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
And this has been the Personality Hacker Podcast. We'll talk to you on the next episode.